Welcome. Thank you so much for spending this evening with me and talking about grief and loss and transforming that through yoga. This is a topic that has become really near and dear to me over the last couple of years, um, as I'm sure many of you have experienced in teaching yoga in your own neck of the woods. Sometimes we develop a passion for a topic and we pursue it and put it out there, and we're so excited to deliver it. And other times a topic finds us. And this is a topic that definitely found me through a lot of different venues and scenarios and situations and circumstances and students. And as a result, I've had the deep honor of walking through grief journeys with a lot of students over these last couple of years or so. And as a result of research I've done along the topic, practicing and working with students, and finding a couple of great resources along the way, I've been able to develop a very yoga fit approach to supporting grief and loss. And in case you don't know, Yoga for Grief and Loss as a 2-day training is debuting in Palm Springs. So this is 2-day training that you can take. It's in Palm Springs in person, and then it's already on the schedule for 3 dates during 2023. I think March, April, and May or something. But it's already on the schedule. So if it's something you would like to study further, it's definitely available. This is the bread and butter of the yoga portion of the approach I'm taking. It's called Healing Through Yoga by Paul Denniston. And it's all about grief and loss and yoga and creating space for all of those experiences to have a place in the yoga environment to be able to acknowledge, to express, and just simply allow the experience to be what it is in an environment that's very supportive. And that's really what we do, right? We invite people into the yoga space and we create a container for whatever anyone's given experiences, and to the best of our ability support that. And so with that said, I'd like to go ahead and jump right on in to our topic for the night, and we will talk about grief and loss a little bit and how to transform grief and loss through yoga. And then we'll actually do it and do a yoga practice. And you can, of course, watch or participate, whatever works best for you, where you are and your space and how you're feeling today. So to start off, I'd like to define grief. And I looked at the Mayo Clinic for this definition. And the Mayo Clinic defines grief as the natural reaction to loss. Grief is both a universal and a personal experience. Individual experience of grief vary and are influenced by the nature of the loss. Some examples of loss include the death of a loved one, the ending of an important relationship, job loss, loss through theft, or the loss of independence through disability. And I'm sure that even in our room here tonight, we could probably come up with 3 or 4 or 10 more experiences that lead to that feeling of loss and the experience of grief. And so whatever that is that you're feeling today in this moment, or if you are attending this workshop with someone else in mind, know that whatever that experience is, even if it wasn't named in this definition, it's absolutely 100% valid because it exists. And we always want to recognize that for ourselves and for our students. If we're feeling it, then it's real, right? We're feeling that sense of loss, we're feeling that grief, then it's something real in our lives that we can support through our yoga. There are several different ways grief can impact us. And we'll just take a little foray through physical First, our physical body can feel grief. Grief can increase inflammation in our bodies, which can then worsen health problems we may already have. And so it may be that someone, already has an existing health condition, and because of added inflammation, that gets worse or experienced in a different way. It could leave our immune system depleted and more vulnerable to infection. So we may be experiencing grief and find that we're more susceptible to illness than we usually are. The heartbreak of grief can increase the blood pressure and the risk of blood clots. And intense grief can alter the heart muscle so much that it causes broken heart syndrome, a form of heart disease with the same symptoms as heart attack. So broken heart syndrome is a very physical manifestation of grief. Stress links the emotional and physical aspects of grief. So stress is the link between the emotional and the physical. The systems of the body that process physical and emotional stress overlap, and emotional stress can activate the nervous system as easily as a physical threat can. So when we have that emotional stress, all of the things that go along with whatever that loss is, whether it's the loss of a loved one, navigating after the loss of a job, the devastation that can happen after the loss of a pet or a relationship, those things can have a same type of effects on our nervous system as a physical threat. So when we're actually in physical danger, that can act very much the same. When our stress is chronic, increased adrenaline and blood pressure can contribute to chronic medical conditions. Research shows that emotional pain activates the same regions of the brain as physical pain. This is why pain-killing drugs ranging from opioids to Tylenol have been shown to ease emotional pain. I think that's pretty fascinating that we process that in our brain in a very similar way, the same regions of the brain. All right, so those are some of the physical manifestations of grief. Very interestingly, there is a physical reaction of grief that is really deeply linked in our biology, in our neurobiology. It changes our body, particularly when we've lost a pet or a loved one or someone in our home that we interact with on a regular basis, because our bodies entrain to one another. And I'm sure that we all recognize that, when we go to our favorite yoga class or to a yoga fit training, and one of the things we say is, oh my gosh, I just feel so good when I'm here. And that's because we entrain to one another and our bodies like that meshing of our systems. Our hearts start to beat the same. Our nervous systems come into a more common ground. And that's especially true when someone we live with, or our pet, that we live with, when we've lost that person, someone we see on a very regular basis, our biology reacts because that feedback or that loop that's been created is interrupted and lost. And our body is searching for that. And we feel it, right? We feel that like ache. Where are they? Why do I feel like my body's reaching out and it's not completing back to me? And so if you feel that way, there's a very biological reason why you feel that way. You're not crazy. That is just part of how we interact in a way that we can't see with our eyes, but we can definitely feel it in our body. As we move on to the mental impacts of grief, WebMD just a couple of years ago did a survey of over 1,000 people and found that after a loss, and the losses were listed as quite a wide range of losses, 83% of people experienced sadness, 42% experienced depression. So of course, most people experience sadness after a loss. It's not always true. You or someone you know or someone you've read about sometimes experiences a deep sense of relief. And that's okay too. All of the reactions to our loss are okay reactions. So most of us do experience sadness though. Almost half, 42% experience depression. So it's very, very common for us to have depression as part of our experience after loss. 31% have a disturbance in sleep patterns. For some of us, that looks like sleeping a whole lot. And for others of us, it looks like not being able to sleep at all. And for others still, it just seems to turn our sleep sort of topsy-turvy. Sometimes I'm sleeping a lot, sometimes I'm not sleeping so much, or maybe I'm getting enough sleep, it's just on an entirely different schedule than it was before. 29% experience anger. So about a third of us, or 3 out of 10, experience anger as well. And that can be ranging in a lot of ways, right? Why did you leave me here? Why did this happen? How could you? And all manner of questions that sort of lead into that anger feeling. And that's okay too. All of our responses to our grief are okay responses. 19% felt anxiety, including post-traumatic stress. And so those things are often kind of hand in hand. Depending on the situation, the loss could definitely cause post-traumatic stress. And so if you're feeling a lot of anxiety or any of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress, and you're wondering, like, this kind of seems like PTSD, I wonder if it could be, it could be, especially as those symptoms and experiences linger for longer periods of time, then we might say for sure, yeah, that's a post-traumatic stress response. 5% had suicidal thoughts and 2% experienced other symptoms. So regardless of what our response to our loss is, there are a lot of ways it can disrupt our life, from emotional responses to physical responses. We may even notice things like changes in activities that we used to enjoy. Like maybe gardening was your thing before. Loved to garden, out there all the time, fussing with the plants, and now I don't really want to. Or maybe it was reading or art or crafting or any number of things. And we may find that for a time, or perhaps for a long time, our activities we enjoy change, or we let some things go as a result of our grief or our loss. On the other side of that, we may actually find that some new things bring us joy that didn't used to. And that can range a lot of ways, but I find that quite a few people enjoy movement in a new and different way, whether that's their yoga practice or spontaneous movement parties, whether that's a little dance party in the living room, or using movement to get out some of that anger and upset, like martial art or something like that, or chopping wood or whatever works best for where you are. Those types of really robust physical activities can help to move that energy out of our body. And we can use our yoga practice in a very similar way to make it a lot more physical and make some really big, robust movements. And we'll do a couple of those in our practice today as well. And I think that will be hopefully enjoyable, but also really eye-opening as a way to use our yoga practice to get difficult energy to move in a really positive way. And then emotionally, you've probably heard of the 5 stages of grief before, right? They are, anger and denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance. You've probably heard those 5 stages before by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And one of the things, I did some research on her work, and one of the things that she said later after she produced or wrote her book on death and dying was that she she hoped that people understood that these are simply 5 of the most common emotions we experience after a loss. It's not a linear progression. It's not a checklist. It's not like, oh, that's depression. You're almost there. Acceptance is next. It's not like that. That's not how we grieve, right? We may cycle in and out of those emotional experiences. We may stay in one of them for a really long time, and we may skip another one altogether. And so when we look at those, there's simply more of a list like, oh yeah, I do feel angry. Oh, that's part of the grieving. I see. So it's more of a like, oh yeah, me too. Yeah, I feel that. Denial, absolutely. I keep forgetting that the bad thing happened. I keep, wishing and longing for a way to make it different. And when we look at that list and we can say, oh, look, that's a common one. Oh, me too. I feel that way too. And so when we look at that list, let's use it that way as a way to say, oh, yeah, that's not uncommon. That's something that a lot of people experience. And so I'm not alone. And I think that that's one of the things that when we use our yoga to come together to work through and to support our grief experience after a loss is that idea of creating a sense of community. Because the reality is pretty much every person you know has experienced some kind of loss in the last 3 years. And when we're talking about grief, particularly for those losses that feel really close to our heart, 3 years is the same as yesterday. It may feel like it happened 5 minutes ago, even if it happened 5 years ago. And that's just part of the way grief is in our body. It's a very present moment sort of experience. So even if we think, my gosh, that was 5 years ago, why am I feeling it so much right now? It's just because we are, because grief is a present moment sort of thing. And there's going to be days, right, when it feels a little more bearable. There's going to be days when it feels a little less awful. There's going to be days where it feels okay, kind of. And there's going to be days when it feels really, really, really terrible. So as we experience our grief, to be able to let go of expectation, that's a very yoga fit idea, isn't it? To let go of our expectation that our grief journey is going to look any particular way and allow it to simply be what it is in this moment is perhaps one of the greatest gifts that we can give each other and that we can give to ourselves, is allowing and accepting. Okay. I just want to check in the chat really quickly. Oh, yes, the name of the book. Let me type it into the chat. Someone asked about the name of the book, and I want to make sure everyone knows. Healing Through Yoga, and it is by Paul Denniston. Oops, Denniston. And then if you are taking the training coming up and you want to get a jump start on the reading, the other one for the training is called It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine. And her book, so Paul's book, The Healing Through Yoga, he talks about the cycle of transformation, which I'm getting ready to talk about. And then it's all about yoga and grief and creating awareness and connection and surrender and all of these things that I'll dive into in just a moment. And then Megan Devine's book, oh, I misspelled her name. It's the regular way, Megan. Her book is more from her own perspective of her grief journey. combined with a whole bunch of research, you guys. It's not just her autobiography of her grief experience. She talks a lot about her grief experience, but she's done a ton of research about how all kinds of people experience grief and move through it, and things that are helpful and things that are less helpful, and ways to move forward. And I think it's a really powerful book to be able to understand a little bit more broadly the types of ways people experience grief. As we all know, our own experiences of grief are very different. Like I was devastated when my first pet died, but that was very different than when my father-in-law died. And also very different from when my family had to move kind of unexpectedly. And all of those were grief for me, but they all felt very different. And so Megan explores a lot of all of those different ways we experience grief. And I think that's really helpful when we are creating yoga for grief, to have a little better understanding of how some other people experience grief, so that we're less taken off guard by someone's experience that may be very different from our own. It's a really powerful resource for that. Okay, so let's talk about those 5 elements of the cycle of transformation of grief. So they are awareness, expression, connection, surrender, and evolution. And these fit beautifully with the essence of Yoga Fit, which I just love, of course. But awareness, the first one, is simply bringing awareness to the experience we're having. As you probably know from your own experience of yoga and just living life being a person, the feelings and experiences that we try to push under the surface are exactly the ones that keep popping back up. But the ones that we allow, even when they're hard, and we bring our awareness to those, and we acknowledge them, and we explore the characteristics of those feelings and experiences, they seem to sort of dissipate, or at the very least, the edges soften a little bit, and they're not quite so unwieldy and unmanageable. And so the first element of the cycle of transformation is that awareness. Really and truly, the way out is through. And so we have to get into the experience of grief and be aware of it and explore it a little bit, so that we're able to move through it. That doesn't mean we're going to get over it, right? We're never going to get over it. That's not how grief works, because grief is simply love. And we don't ever want that love to go away, right? Whoever we loved, our friend, our relative, our pet, our, whoever it was that we've lost, our, whatever that situation is, if we loved an opportunity that we had, a work that was so meaningful to us, we don't want that love to go away. But because that life situation has gone away, that's why we feel that sense of grief. And so we'll learn to move forward through that grief, and we do that through awareness. The next one is expression. And this one, I think, can be really, really powerful through yoga, because culturally, we're often expected to be all done expressing our grief outwardly after around 2 weeks, right? Like, we're expected to be back at work. We're expected to be fine. We're expected to, be back to our regular schedule. Or maybe if we have a really understanding group of people around us, maybe it's a couple of months, but it's probably not a couple of years, which may be the most appropriate. And so when we have our yoga experience to express what our body, our mind, and our emotions are feeling, this is such a great gift for our students and for ourselves, to be able to express simply through breathing. maybe through tears, maybe through big, robust movements. Whatever our body feels is so powerful to being able to move through the intensity of the experience. The next one is connection. And because grief pretty much always means a loss of some sort of connection, recreating a sense of connection is a really, really beautiful way to begin that process of feeling a forward movement. That connection can be with myself, reconnecting with myself. It can be connecting to my understanding of the divine. It can be connection to all living beings. It can be connection to my yoga friends in class. It can be learning how to develop connections with people who are in my life, but maybe I haven't connected with them in this way before. And so we can begin that like so many things on our mat. Here I am on my yoga mat in class with other people who are also experiencing a sense of loss, and together we will create a sense of connection and a sense of belonging and a sense of community. The fourth one is surrender. And surrender is one of the hardest parts, as I'm sure you know. We don't want to do it. I do not want to surrender to that. It does not seem like it's going to be a good idea because it means accepting something that I wish wasn't true. And that can be so hard because I don't want it to be true. And since I don't want it to be true, I do not want to surrender and I don't want to accept it. But it really is the way I move forward into a place of being able to truly accept my life as it is now and moving forward, surrendering. I think we get scared of it because it feels like either giving up or like if I let go, that means letting go forever. But it simply means surrendering to this moment and what this moment holds. And when we're able to do that, even in little bite-sized pieces, can I accept in this moment at this time what my life is? And I practice it right now. And then I practice it again next week at yoga class. And I practice it again next week at yoga class. And even if it's for 1 minute, I'm learning how to be in this moment and practice it so that I can take it off my mat, just like everything we practice on our yoga mat. And so this surrender aspect is really, really, really hard. But as we learn how to surrender to physical sensation, to emotional expression, to connection, we begin to build our surrender muscle so that we're able to then continue moving forward in our life. And then the fifth one is evolution. And this one can be pretty scary too, because that means that we've surrendered, which is the first scary part. And oftentimes we feel very afraid of that idea of moving on. And I don't want to do that either. I don't want to move on. I don't want to let go. But evolution doesn't mean that we have to move on. It just simply means we're moving forward. And I can move forward still holding the love in my heart for the one I've lost. I will always carry that love with me. And I will always have some experiences, probably here and there, or maybe more sometimes than others, of that grief that wells up. But I can also evolve forward as the person I am, having experienced that. And so we take that with us. And oftentimes, as we do evolve forward, we find that our love for that person takes on a new shape. Maybe we develop a passion for a new direction in life as a result of. Oftentimes after loss, people do things like develop nonprofit organizations or dedicate their life to, yoga for grief, or whatever it is, a way to bring about love and support in their community for other people who are experiencing something really difficult. So sometimes it can look like that. Other times it can look like developing a new sense of balance or perseverance in my life. Perhaps it's a new development of hope in our life for something new. There's so many ways we can evolve and move forward without feeling like we have to move on. So those are our 5 elements of the cycle of transformation. All right. Let me check the chat again and see how we're doing. Okay. All righty. I think that's good. All right. Are you guys ready to do a little moving? Do some yoga together. All right. So, of course, feel free to practice, to watch, to do a little bit of both, camera on, camera off, whatever you like. This time is for us to move our bodies, to experience, to enjoy. So I'm just going to get my mat set up right behind me here. I'm sure you guys need to do a little setup too. And let's get ourselves ready for some yoga. Okay. I think I've got my space ready. And all righty. There we go. Put that down just a little bit. I want to make sure everyone who watches on recording is able to see. Okay. So let's start off in a seated position. If you're using the floor, fantastic. Feel free to place any supports underneath that you like. You can also do this seated in a chair. And any comfortable seated position, cross-legged, legs stretched out, whatever works best. As we come to our seated position, let's take a moment to soften our gaze downward or to close our eyes. And because the holidays can be a time when we experience a little more sadness and maybe even some depression after a loss, this class is about transforming depression into hope. And as we bring our awareness to our body sitting here, I'd like for us to take our attention inward and to notice when I feel sad or when I feel depressed, my body feels blank. taking a moment to notice the sensations in your body whenever sadness creeps up or depression settles in. And having created an awareness with sadness or with the feeling of depression, let's now set an intention. And if you like, placing hands on the heart center or at heart center with palms together. My intention for this time is to blank. Perhaps my intention for this time is to give myself space for my grief. Or my intention for this time is to acknowledge my loss. Perhaps my intention for this time is to nurture myself. And as we've set our intention, we can release our hands so that they're comfortably resting on our body. And let's feel our physical connection to the mat, noticing where our legs, our hips, our feet. We may even want to touch the mat with our hands and feel this connection, not just to the mat, but even deeper, feeling that connection to the earth. And if we find that our mind and our emotions tend to be a little higher, like anxiety or scatteredness, let's allow the energy of our body to reach down into the stability of the earth beneath us. If we find that we feel the heaviness of sadness and depression, as we can make this connection to the earth, let's feel ourselves drawing up the earth's energy right up into our body. Let's invite our breath a little deeper into our body so that each inhale is a little bigger. Each exhale more intentional. Let's take one more round of breath here. And now letting the robustness of our breath relax just a little bit, let's begin to scan our bodies and notice if we feel any physical pain in our body or any discomfort. And as we notice any pain or discomfort, let's simply acknowledge it and then bring our attention back to our breath. And a couple of more breaths here, taking that attention to any emotional pain or discomfort. And the same, noticing that pain or discomfort, acknowledging it, and then returning to the breath again. Now let's bring one hand to our heart and one hand to our belly. And with our inhale, let's say in our mind the word body. And with our exhale, let's say the word breath. And let's repeat this for a few cycles. Inhaling, body. Exhaling, breath. Let's take one more round here. Now releasing our hands. Let's come to a familiar flowing arm, reaching arms overhead as we inhale and drawing them right down through the center of our being with our exhale. Inhaling, reaching wide, and exhaling, hands to the heart center. And here, as we go through this familiar movement, let's imagine ourselves scooping up the shared energy here in our Zoom room and drawing that energy right to the center of our being. Being aware of the way we are supporting each other simply by being here together. And let's do a few more of those. One more. Now let's bring our hands to the tops of our shoulders. And as we bring our hands here, we'll simply move in a gentle twist from side to side. I really like this one for this application because it encourages us to keep our body nice and tall as we move through this rotation. It helps us to feel encouraged not to slump over, which is a really common body posture whenever we're feeling sad or we feel depression settling in. So nice, tall, easy rotation from side to side. This also, going from side to side, helps us to see things all around us rather than just what's right in front of us. We're able to take in the sights and the view of a much wider area of this moment. And then let's bring it back to the center again. Releasing our hands down, maybe even give those a little bit of a shake out, getting some of that energy moving in the arms. Hands on our knees, let's start to move into a seated cat-cow. Feeling our spine round in one direction and then in the other. Even a simple spinal movement can feel so energizing. When we study the Sanskrit names of the poses, we learn that cat-cow is called chakrasana, chakra asana, because it moves our spine all along all of the chakra energies of our body. So as we move through this posture, we're allowing these energies to flow and move together, bringing about a greater sense of balance, a greater sense of ease from our root all the way to the crown. And let's take one more round of breath here. And bringing it back to a neutral spine. Let's turn over now onto our hands and our knees. We can move our support out of the way if we had our hips supported on a block or blanket. And let's rest back into a child's pose. Allowing this child's pose to flow a few times forward into a kneeling plank and back to a child's pose again. Feeling our breath connect with this movement, a resting back, and then an energizing movement forward. And the next time we come forward into that kneeling plank, let's step our right foot forward into a lunge. And allow our hips to rest a little lower, allowing our heart to lift a little higher, feeling a deepening in the body. And then stepping that foot back and pressing back to child's. Flowing it forward, let's step our left foot to the top into a lunge, letting the hips release and the chest lifting high. Allowing that same deepening in our body on this side. And sending it back to child's again. Now tucking our toes, let's lift into down dog. Taking some time here to pedal it out. Allowing the backs of the legs to lengthen, feeling that great stretch in our shoulders, our body pressing down into the mat as our hips rise up away from the mat. Pressing up high onto the balls of both feet, really stretching through the bottoms of the feet here. And as we release our heels down, let's step our right foot to the top into a lunge. Again, feeling our hips relax low as our heart lifts high. More energy in this lunge with the back knee lifted. And now sending it back to down dog again. And stepping our left foot forward into lunge. Hips relaxing as our heart lifts. Feeling that energy flowing through our legs, lifting through our spine. This time, let's press up into forward fold. Taking a moment here as we allow our head to relax down, let's nod our head yes. And then shaking our head no. And back to the center. Inhaling for a half lift, a monkey pose. And reaching wide, let's press up and overhead, feeling that extended mountain. Let's feel ourselves pressing down through our feet and lifting through both sides of our body, through the front and back of our body. Feeling ourselves press down and rise up at the same time. Let's take our arms out wide, sort of reaching just out in a wide way and adding a little bit of a back bend. Feeling our heart open up. And then returning to that neutral spine, let's fold it all the way down. Inhaling for a monkey pose. Releasing to a forward fold, and if we like, adding a little bit of a squatted position here. Our body all tucked in toward itself. And then pressing up to the forward fold. reaching wide and up to extended mountain. So you can choose to do or not do that squat at the bottom. Here, let's take our arms wide and add that back bend. Returning to neutral spine as we fold it all the way down. Inhaling for monkey. Releasing to forward fold. If we like, the option to add that squat down. Lifting to our forward fold. And reaching wide, overhead extended mountain. So we'll do this one a couple more times. This one is called the Phoenix Rising Flow. So if we think about ourselves like a phoenix rising up out of the ashes, opening our wings wide, our heart lifting up. And as we return to neutral and fold it in, allowing ourselves to have that time of quiet reflection. Inhaling, monkey pose. A little bit of a checking in, and then releasing downward again with the option to add that deep bend of the knees and let our body fold in on itself. And then as we begin to rise up out of the ashes, forward fold. Monkey pose. Releasing and reaching wide and overhead. Wings wide and heart lifted. And to neutral, and one more time. Folding. Monkey pose. Releasing. Option for the fold and bend in the knees. Returning to forward fold. Monkey half lift. Releasing and reaching wide. All the way overhead and arms wide, heart lifting up. And returning to neutral and bringing hands to our heart center. Today, my intention is to nurture myself. Today, my intention is to allow room for my grief. Today, my intention is to build connection with my community. Today, my intention is to be present in this moment. Today, my intention is to fill in the blank. All right, let's keep that energy moving forward now. The next one is called breaking chains. And for this one, we bring our arms in front, and then we'll, with a robust movement, open them out wide to the sides. And bringing them together, it's as though we are breaking out of chains. And you can even add a little vocalization. Ah! And again, ah! Keep that going. I'm going to let somebody in the room here. And together. Ah! If you have room to move around, you might even do it with a step. If you're really going somewhere. Ah! And you could take that in a circle. You can take it forward and back. We're breaking through whatever feels like it's keeping us stuck, keeping us from moving forward in the way we want to. Ah! 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 Let's do two more. Ah! Ah! All right, let's keep that theme going. Let's turn our arms upward. Now we are holding on to two imaginary machetes or swords, and we are going to clear the path in front of us. We're clearing the path. It may seem like we don't know how to get through, but we're clearing that path. We can actually move around if we want to. Great big arm movements. Maybe it's just forward and back on our mat, or we may feel like standing in one place. That's all okay. Clearing that path forward. Sometimes it takes a lot of big energy to get through all of the things that seem as though they're in our way. Or maybe they don't seem that way. Maybe they are actually in our way, but we are going to clear that path. Now let's begin to make our way back to the top of our mat. And whenever we feel complete, then we'll let that last machete fall and we'll drop them to our sides. Let's feel that energy moving through our body. Some nice heat built up, some forward moving energy. All right. Our next one is called the pendulum. And so we'll stand on one leg and simply swing the other one back and forth. Sometimes we may find we need to put a toe down somewhere. If we start to lose our sense of balance, we'll come back to it and continue that swinging action. This can be as big or as small as we like. And notice that as we continue this motion, what started off as maybe something that felt like it threw us off balance, as we get the movement going, we find we're actually able to hold our balance really well in the middle of this movement. Getting that one leg really going. All right, let's give the other one a chance to practice. Switching it out. It may start off a little more tentative. And then as we come into a rhythm with the pendulum, we may find yet again ease starting to settle in. We're able to balance doing something that maybe we hadn't thought about doing before. We may find some equal parts freedom and stability in our hips here. All right, let's bring it back to the center. Standing on our two legs, having gotten some great movement going in our shoulders, some great movement in our hips, our body with some more freedom. All right, let's bring in some taps, some options here. We can tap at our collarbones, or maybe we want to crisscross our hands and tap at our collarbones. Or we may enjoy tapping on our opposite arms. Find a place to tap that feels just right for today. And if you have another favorite place, please feel free to do that too. And here, as we come back to a sense of sort of an internal reflection, whichever way we're doing that, let's take a moment to notice how we're feeling emotionally. And maybe that's right now, or maybe it's the way we've been feeling today or the last many days or weeks or months even. And let's just take a moment to name those feelings. I am scared. I am sad. I am angry. I am worried. I am upset. Continue saying I am, and whatever feeling comes to mind, it can be a little one or a big one, it can be the same one over and over. I am. Or perhaps I feel works better for you. I feel sad. I feel angry. Taking another moment here to acknowledge our own experience in this moment. And as we find that that feels complete, we've acknowledged all of the feelings. We can allow the taps to come to a stop and tune into our breath. Letting arms relax by our sides. Let's inhale, reaching overhead. Swan diving to fold it in. Let's take one last monkey pose and relaxing hands down. Let's come onto our hands and knees for all fours. And feel ourselves pressing down through our hands and arms, pressing down through our legs and our feet. Feeling that strong physical connection to the mat and the strong energetic connection to the earth. And as we feel into that strong connection, our body pressing down, let's release the things that we'd like to release. And if we find that we have energy that we need, let's draw that energy up from the very center of the earth. And now let's come to a seated position. We want to bring back our support for our hips. Let's return to flowing arms. And this time, as we flow our arms with our breath, let's imagine ourselves gathering up all of the aspects of our own experience. The things that feel difficult, the things we don't like, the things that surprise us with their beauty, all of it. Our sense of connection and community we have right now. The entirety of our experience, all of that love, drawing it right to the center of our heart. Knowing that every sadness is based in love. The anger we feel, also based in love. And any other of our feelings. All ways that we're trying to figure out how to express this love that's been lost. The love itself is still there. We're searching for ways to express it. And being grateful for this opportunity to express it with our body. One more. Relaxing hands to the tops of our knees. Let's begin to circle our body. Taking ourselves in these big wide circles. As our body circles, let's recognize the circle of our experience of life. Recognizing that it never really stays the same. It's always moving. Sometimes it starts to feel familiar. We know which way it's going. And then suddenly, when we least expect it, the direction changes. And that feels unfamiliar at first. But after a little while, we start to feel familiar in this new direction. And now let's start to make those circles a little smaller. And a little smaller. And a little smaller. until we finally end up in the middle in our easy seat. And when we come to that calm, quiet center place, even as our body becomes still, we may be aware of the teeniest circling sensation. On the inside, the movement is still happening. And as we feel that energy moving inside, let's recognize that that energy is always there. If we lose our connection with it, we can take our body through some of these flowing movements to reestablish our awareness of the movement of the energy of our own body. We can remember this shared experience, knowing that on this Tuesday evening, there are about 50 other people just in our Yoga Fit community, also taking time to acknowledge and support their own experience of grief or loss. Now let's bring our hands to our heart center. And as we bring our hands to our heart center, close that sensation of that energy right in the center of our being. Even though we are in all different areas, different cities all across, let's send connection to one another and support. Sharing this sense of community and support here together. Offering to ourselves and to one another gratitude for the acknowledgement of our own grief that's only there because we have such deep love. Thanking ourselves for acknowledging this love. Thanking each other for holding and creating this space together. And thank you all for allowing me to guide this practice. Namaste. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. We have a few minutes that we could answer questions or chat a little bit. I see you guys have been doing a little chatting in the chat box. The purpose of the tapping, that helps to calm our nervous system. So particularly when we get on any of those points, if you think about like emotional freedom technique tapping, the top of the head, the inner eyebrow, the outer eyebrow, under the eyes, under the nose, crease of the chin, collarbones, under the arms, all of those places are particularly calming to our nervous system. So it helps to bring that down. Oh, I see somebody answered that. Thank you, Sherry. So good to have you all. Anyone else have questions or things you'd like to chit chat about? So good to have you all here together. Really enjoyed getting to practice with you guys. I hope I get to see you all soon too. Palm Springs maybe, or an online training coming up soon. I do, Michelle. I use the tapping quite a bit, just like this. Like I'll stick it right in the middle of a practice. Or I also will offer like little yoga snacks. And I do little yoga snacks a lot when I'm working with students and clients who are working through some grief, where it's maybe just a breathing practice, maybe a tapping, an affirmation, and maybe one like flowing body movement, something that they could do in like 5 minutes in the bathroom at work, or at the end of their day before they go to bed, or in the morning when they wake up. Like I like to create little chunks that people can actually really do and not have to put on their fancy tights or put in a high ponytail or get out their yoga mat or any of that, like stuff you can do for real in the middle of everyday life. Let's see here. The chat's going so fast. Let's see here. Oh, yes, Elizabeth, now you know why you tap. Yeah, we do it intuitively, right? Like if you've ever seen yourself or kids or something like taking a test, we totally will like tap on tapping points with our pencil when we're trying to think. Like it's something that we do intuitively because we know it calms us down. Let's see here. How would I meet the energy in the room if some are more angry and some might be feeling vulnerable? So if that were the case, I would definitely start standing or seated, not laying down, because if you've got angry energy in the room, the people who are feeling vulnerable might feel really, really vulnerable. So I would probably start standing or seated, probably most likely standing, and start off with some of those like big practices to get that energy like out and then calm it down. I usually find that when there's big energy in the room, it's important to meet that where it is and start there and then take the class where I want them to go. The ones who are feeling vulnerable may not love the great big movements, but you could also give options if you wanted to. Or flow into it, like start with a flowing arm and then maybe into clearing the path and then maybe into the big one and then start to bring it back down again. Could the pendulum be practiced with the balancing foot on a block? I think it could, Kim, is especially if you had a wall or bar to hang on to. I just want to make sure everybody felt confident and not like they were going to fall over. But absolutely, that would help with being able to swing because you'd have more space. Definitely. Great to see you, Cassandra. How does this help with ambiguous grief and loss? Like care? Yes, absolutely, Melanie. 100%. One of the great things about using yoga, whether that's for trauma, whether it's for caregivers, whether it's for grief and loss, whatever it is, because it gets the energy of the body moving and balancing, in many ways, it kind of doesn't matter what the upset or imbalance is, it helps to bring us back to the center. So even if, like, say you did a class that was for caregivers, but they didn't think that they like needed it for the emotional reason. Maybe you put it out there as like building strength and stability for caregivers because they have to help like move the person they're caring for around a lot. So they want to learn how to use their core really well and stabilize with their hips and stuff like that. Like you could totally put it together as a class that helps them with the stabilizing and the strength on a physical level, and then also add in some of the emotional support and the expression and it'll be well-rounded, and you're also addressing their felt need as well. That's kind of like putting cauliflower in the chili or something, right? Like meeting the felt need and the deeper need all at the same time. Thanks to everyone. Let's see here. Anything else? You know what? Michelle said that she's struggling with knowing how to help my grief right now. I totally get that. Even though we are yoga teachers and some of us may be yoga therapists and totally know what to do when it's somebody else, it's really hard to apply it ourselves sometimes. And all the time, you guys, I mean, all the time, my best friend will give me my own advice, or my daughter will give me my own advice, because it's so hard when you're the one experiencing something to know the simplest thing, like, oh yeah, this would be a great time for an alternate nostril breath, or, you know, I probably feel a whole lot better if I did a 10-minute meditation, or gee, I wonder why I have that diffuser on my desk and I haven't used it, but I love essential oils. Because when we're in the middle of a big life experience, the obvious things aren't obvious, right? Because we're dealing so deeply with what's bothering us, what challenges come our way, what loss we've experienced, whatever's happening. And so I often find that having someone else encourage me to do what I already know to do is necessary. I need that. Thank you, Jennifer Bufford. See you in Palm Springs too. Oh, thank you, Linda Jam, for the resource on tapping in the chat there. Energy medicine yoga, Donna Eden. Also in healthcare too. If you guys want any of the stuff from the chat, if you click on the little 3-dot thing where you would type in a message, you can save the chat yourself from this class. Yeah, the yoga snacks, Kat, they're so good. Oh, Marianne, glad you like the Phoenix Rising. I love that one too. And the Breaking the Chains. I know that Phoenix Rising, you know, it's a little controversial because it has that deep knee squat, but I do kind of love that feeling of being tucked in. So if you or your students feel okay in that posture, I think it can be pretty powerful. Thanks, Missy. So Michelle, the training in Palm Springs, we will go in depth on what is grief, what is loss, what does that mean for our body, our mind, our emotions, all of the like science behind grief. And then we will talk about how to tend to that grief. We're going to talk about how to incorporate all different kinds of stuff, Ayurveda stuff, yoga stuff. We'll get into some yoga philosophy stuff, all of the ways we can come in and support the grief. And we will dive deep into the 5 aspects of the cycle of transformation from Paul's book, and how exactly that marries together with our Essence of Yoga Fit, and how to create classes putting those 2 things together. And we'll use quite a bit of inspiration from Paul's book, but then also use a lot of our Yoga Fit style to bring it together. So the classes will very much end up looking like what I just taught. A little bit of new fun poses and expressions combined with poses that are really familiar. So our Yoga Fit students who may come to this type of a class, they will feel comfortable because it's not so different, right? There's still a warm-up-y part. There's still a work part. There's still a cool down part. So it'll have sort of a familiar rhythm to the class. And then we incorporate those things that bring in awareness and connection, surrender, evolution, etc., so that we're able to move through those aspects of grief in a really supportive way. Thank you, Luann. Thanks, Melanie. Thank you, Kim. Thanks, Noelle. So great to have everybody. Anyone else with questions or comments? Okay. Yes, I will be in Palm Springs teaching this class. It is on Saturday and Sunday of Palm Springs. Is that right? Yes, Saturday and Sunday of Palm Springs. And I'm teaching positive psychology right before that. So positive psychology right into grief and loss. So, so we'll kind of go from one extreme to the other there. Oh, yes, Michelle. Yes, thank you. I'm so glad you were here. And I know hard. Thank you for being here. Training dates of Palm Springs. I will see you there. Connie, Friday, caregivers. Woohoo. Let's see. Palm Springs is January 4th through the 8th. So that very first week of the year. All right, everybody, stick around if you still have more questions. If you are ready to move on with your evening, we are officially done. And I hope to see you all soon, whether that's in person or online. Hi, you guys. Missy, the way I vary it to keep students coming back, it depends. If I'm working with a person, like a one-on-one, I will just customize it to whatever they're going through and how they're experiencing it, like, week to week or however often I'm seeing them. If it's a more general, like yoga for grief class, what I do is I will go through the cycle. Awareness, expression, connection, surrender, evolution. And I will just do one a week. And then when I get to the end, I will do a class like the one I taught tonight, transforming depression into hope. I'll do a transforming one of the difficult, challenging emotions of grief into another emotion. So I'll go through a cycle and then I'll do a transformation class. And then I'll do another cycle and do a transformation class. So I'll work my way through all of those aspects of grief. And that seems to work really well because, it kind of hits all of the different things. And even if that's not where you are right now, I find that for some, they're like, oh, I didn't even know I needed that, but that was kind of great to experience that this week. Or I was feeling kind of stuck here, but since we did that, I feel like it kind of jostled some things loose because it wasn't exactly where I am. It took my focus to a different place.